Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
With weeks now left in one of the most acutely debated and downright argued political seasons, the difference between hyperbole and reality and effect are impossible to delineate. Thank you so much for supporting these last 25 years, the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy. I'm Chris William, and the economy continues its warmish expansion. The Fed still seems unclear on the way forward, and who our next commander-in-chief might be is still a huge question. It's back to school, it's fall activity, et cetera, this time on Carolina Business Review. Another dialogue with those who impact our lives and businesses, and later on, South Carolina's chief legal eagle, Attorney General Alan Wilson.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Dr. Ronnie Booth from Tri-County Technical College, Scott Dorney of the North Carolina Military Business Center, and special guest Alan Wilson, South Carolina Attorney General.
Hello, welcome to our program, gentlemen. Good to have you. Scott, welcome back. Dr. Booth, nice to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Let's talk about this workforce skills gap. Okay. This theme, as you both know, I'm not telling you anything, it's been running in the background for a long time, not just with economic developers, Ronnie, but it's the technical and the community college systems in the Carolinas, and employers who have moved operations to the Carolinas will say, almost ad nauseum, that they can't find the qualified skills and the qualified workers. Dr. Booth, want to push you on this just a little bit. If that's the case, you'd be hard-pressed to see that in the economic performance that we've seen so far. This is the fourth longest expansion in the last 160 years. Wage inflation is going up, consumer confidence is high, unemployment in the Carolinas is low pretty historically. So where's the rub? Where does it show up?
Well, it shows up in that we have a number of high school students coming out that want to go into manufacturing and want to go into that line of work. But historically, I mean, the last 20 years, given the loss of manufacturing in South Carolina, we remember the decline with the textile industry. There's a mindset that maybe manufacturing is not the career track for my child. But the manufacturing we live in, the world we live in today is so different than it ever has been and requires a significantly higher skill set. So there are some people that want to, there's some people that aren't aware of the opportunities, but then there is a real gap between even the want to and then the skill sets necessary in manufacturing today.
So would there be a higher multiple in the growth of manufacturing in South Carolina, and going to give you a chance here, Scott, in North Carolina, would there be a much higher multiple if we address this issue?
I believe so. And I believe there's another category of folk, though, of those, we might call it the 25 to 45-year-old who's undereducated and underemployed, who wants a better life, but we are not doing the kind of job I think we ought to be in terms of helping those folk get to that spot where they would like to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, how does that overlay on the veterans population in the Carolinas, which is pretty substantial?
Absolutely. In North Carolina, I believe we have the 9th highest veteran population of any state in the country, over almost 1 million veterans in the state, and South Carolina certainly has many too. And I think that's key. We have almost 20,000 people transition out of our military bases in North Carolina every year, and South Carolina certainly has as many. And these are highly skilled folks, and being able to retain them here in our state and capture those skills and integrate them into our workforce is a real challenge. Some of the folks have directly related skills. They're avionics mechanics, they're engineers. Others, obviously, some in our combat arms. I think one big issue we have to address is skill gap. We've got folks with great soft skills, they're highly disciplined, they're educated, they're trainable. You tell them to come to work at 8 o'clock in the morning and they think they're on vacation. But in some cases we have...
Because of the rigor that they had prior in the military.
Absolutely. But there are distinct skill gaps. And to go to the larger point, there are millions of jobs in the United States, but they're high-tech skills that continue to go unfilled. And we've got to adjust our community college and other programs to ensure that we're addressing these skill gaps to get the quantity, the quality that our employers need.
So, okay, so for both of you gentlemen, is this just about General Assembly's writing a bigger check to... No? Where's the disconnect?
Well, I have a lot of good friends in K-12. Used to teach K-12 teachers. But K-12 gets rewarded right now for sending students and measured for sending students to the university. So we will tend to do what we get rewarded for. I think the reward system needs to change a bit in terms of rewarding systems for generating individuals who are ready for gainful employment in the manufacturing and the high-tech industry. So I think there's a gap in terms of how we educate students from K-12 and then the world in which they're going to have to live.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our educational programs are like big ships. They take a long time to turn. The operating philosophy, I can tell you, in the North Carolina community college system is definitely shifting to let's not get people in and keep them here as long as we can. Let's get them into our programs, give them appropriate credit in some cases for military training and military experience. Keep them as little time as possible to fill those skill gaps that are really important, and then get them out a job as quickly as possible.
Yeah. So let me ask you a frank question then. And you talked about it being a big ship, Scott, and it's hard to turn. So you've got a couple things here. You've got community colleges that have, Dr. Booth, and this is not a slam on the technical or the community college systems, but they've been seen as secondary citizens to the higher ed, not just the liberal arts, but the four-year program. So you've got that dynamic, and then you've got a funding dynamic, and then you've got a PR problem among the kids coming up or the parents coming up. So is this just about the community colleges and the technical colleges not being able to get the word out? Is that?
No. Historically, maybe that's been part of it, but we at our college in particular and many others are aggressively working with our high school guidance counselors now, including them in the conversation, helping them understand the world of work in which their students can participate. Everything from dual enrollment now that's not just about university transfer, but dual enrollment and technical career pathways, so we can engage students in opportunities, as Scott said, so they can get a quick start, get a job, understanding that then the employer is going to pay for that continuing education. So there are a number of pieces at work here, but I would say the colleges, all I'm familiar with, are aggressively trying to get the word out. But it takes a long time to crack that nut. I go back to the ship. To change ideas, to change a culture is very difficult to do. What often gets it is when we start helping those high school guidance counselors understand the salaries that these young men and women are going to earn when they go to manufacturing.
And Ronnie, the other thing people will say offline, the technical colleges will say that, but they're still selling themselves as an entrance to a four-year program. Do you see that? Do you feel that?
I see it. Unfortunately, I see way too much of that. That is not our core mission. Some see that as their primary mission, but we do not do that. That's not who we are. I would dare say South Carolina and the North Carolina system does a really good job of helping students understand there's a great career path that you can get on right now and in 2 years or less, being a good job. So unfortunately, across the country, I've seen way too much of that.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see us, in a sense, get back to the root.
So you got about a minute left to address this, Scott. Is there, I'm not going to say an easy fix, is there a simple thing we could do that would break down a barrier that would make some headway here?
Well, I think one thing we need to do within the community college, and the military business center is part of the community college system, is to focus not so much always on the traditional population, the out of high school but at our older students, our student population's getting older, non-traditional sources like our transitioning military folks, looking at programs like Solar Ready Vets that we've started, a 5-6 week training program to give transitioning military people the basic skills that they need to get into industry as soon as possible. Whether it's in the HVAC industry or the solar installation industry or IT, getting the folks the critical skills that they need as soon as possible to get them into the workforce is critical to growing our businesses and making this recovery even more energetic.
Just quick follow-up. Is there a put me in, coach kind of attitude with those that have been in the military, have gotten out? I don't want to put words in your mouth, Scott, but are they queued up? Are the guys and the gals that were in the service queued up to do this? Or is it, we're not sure about it?
No, absolutely. I mean, the folks, and I mentioned the soft skills, folks coming out of the military are highly dedicated, motivated, ready to get into the workforce. You know, the military is getting somewhat smaller, so folks are getting out that may or may not want to get out, but they're focused on success. But there is a recognition that in a lot of cases, to be employable, they've got to fill that critical skills gap. And our community colleges, technical schools play a critical role in getting those basic skills. What we have to also do is educate our employers about the value of hiring military folks and what they bring to the organization. And as long as they have the basic skills, and they need to have those skills to be able to be successful in the business, they can grow with the business and develop higher level skills.
Thanks, guys. Let's get our guest out here in just a second. Next week on this program, he is the I want to say relatively new budget director for the state of North Carolina. His name is Andrew Heath, a rising star in the Republican Party, but many say he can think outside the box and can think across party lines. We will find out. Andrew Heath, North Carolina budget director, next week. And then in a couple weeks, Susan DeVore is the highest paid CEO in both states. And she can prove it by looking at the performance of her company. It's called Premier. It used to be called Premier Healthcare. She will be our guest on this program. Remember the year 2000, Bush v. Gore, the hanging Chad, the election too close to call, the charges of voter fraud. Wouldn't that be interesting if the third branch of our government, the judicial, again, played a key role in this presidential election? Except maybe this time it's not about a Supreme Court decision on who won, but rather the responsibility of the next president naming the vacant Justice Scalia's chair on that highest court in the land. Joining us now is the Palmetto State's Attorney General, the Honorable Alan Wilson. Your Honor, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
What do you think about that? Is this presidential election is one of the most important things about who's going to get that chair on the Supreme Court?
Well, if the death of Justice Scalia told us anything, that elections do have consequences. And in my personal experience as Attorney General of South Carolina for the last 6 years, I've been involved in well over 60 legal actions against the federal government because the federal government has basically ignored the will of Congress, the people's elected representatives, and they've basically ruled through executive fiat, a lot of overreach. Laws are meant to have predictability for people, for the citizens of the respective states. And I've challenged whether it's Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, the immigration overreach, or the numerous EPA regulations flowing out of the federal government. It's not always I disagree with what the intent of the law is. It's the way the law was implemented. And a lot of times the laws are implemented through bureaucrats in the executive branch of government who don't go through the elective process, the bill writing process. They just force these things down on businesses, and it costs a lot of money. And we're challenging that process. So if you have courts that aren't holding the federal government accountable and allowing the executive branch to end run around the legislative branch, then you're basically not going to have a lot of predictability for businesses.
Is it, Mr. Attorney General, is that the only tool that the chief legal boss in a state like South Carolina can do? And somebody once said, and I know you've heard this, that if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you're an attorney, everything's going to look like a possible lawsuit. Is there another way to nuance that, to compel, in this case, as you've mentioned it, a federal government to do something in a state of South Carolina that they know, that you know, or you feel like the constituents in South Carolina feel is right?
Well, for me, I always like to talk through things. I mean, I don't knee-jerk to a lawsuit. Oftentimes, that is the last thing we want to do. I mean, there's a comment process that we go through, that we meet with members of the federal and state regulators that we deal with often, and we try to work through these things. My bag of tools as the Chief Legal Officer of South Carolina is to utilize the court system and those legal tools that I have. But obviously, I always prefer to use the State Department over the War Department. Sometimes you're left with no choice.
Good point. I'll let you guys get in here because I'll keep talking to the Attorney General. Go ahead, Ronnie.
A point related to just what I do, a question, and we've talked a little bit about this, but for clarification more than anything else, the public entities like Tri-County Technical College and then our friends in North Carolina too, and then there are the private proprietary colleges and universities, and we've seen in the news lately about some of the bad players, if you will, or perceived bad players having issues. What's the role in South Carolina in particular in terms of the Attorney General's office and consumer issues related to higher education, particularly in the for-profit sector?
So I'm here in Charlotte. It's football season, so let me go to the football metaphor.
Okay.
I'm the guy in the black and white stripe,
Yeah.
shirt. My job is to create an environment where everyone who's competing has a fair and equal opportunity to get the ball in the end zone.
Yeah.
Same in the business community, whether it's a for-profit college or university or it's some other type of business in a particular industry. My job is not to pick winners and losers. My job is to make sure that the rules are applied equally and fairly, and that there's predictability. My big government should be 5 things. It should be responsible, predictable, accountable, profitable, and stable. Oftentimes, there's no predictability. I talked about the courts. The courts sometimes put their fingers on the scale and they don't follow the rule of law. The same is true here. The Attorney General in the state of South Carolina needs to protect its consumers, but it also needs to protect the good business actors against the bad business actors who are cutting corners and not following the law, but needs to do it in a way where there is balance. And you don't want to have an overly litigious environment, but you don't want to have the Wild West either. Yeah. And so that's how I approach issues involving the for-profit or any other type of industry business actor that's breaking the law.
Okay. That's good.
Scott?
Mr. Attorney General, we've been discussing economic and workforce development, and South Carolina's certainly been very successful in recruiting new businesses and growing businesses here within the state. What's the role of the Attorney General's office in that business recruitment process, and what challenges are you seeing in economic development in regard to your office?
So that's a great question. First, as I travel the country and I'm talking to large and small businesses alike who are looking at coming to South Carolina, they look at lots of metrics in determining where they want to set up their shop in the respective states. One of those metrics is the litigation environment. Again, my job is to protect consumers, protect the environment, to protect good businesses from the bad business actors. But oftentimes there are states out there that become overly litigious because those administrations see businesses as a form of revenue. Grab that business by his feet and shake him till the money comes out of his pocket. That is not my job as the Attorney General. And so what I try to do is I try to have a balanced approach. I never sue a business or anyone in South Carolina without having a conversation with them first. I tell these people all over the country, you come to my state, I want a relationship with you because I want you to know that you can pick up the phone and you can call me directly if you have a question about whether you're stepping over the line. And if you inadvertently step over the line, does it require a lawsuit to address it? Or can it be handled in a much nicer, quieter way? Again, our job is not to hammer businesses and to shake them down. Our job is to create a fair, even playing environment. So I believe my job as the Attorney General is to be the type of referee that does not promote an overly litigious environment, and people know that if I go to South Carolina and try to set up a business, I'm going to have a predictable environment where I know that if I do X, make a business decision, that Y will definitely happen, and that I won't get hit out of left field from an Attorney General who wants to shake me down.
So have you had to feel like you have to invoke the litigious nature of the office against the federal government around the Department of Energy, and I'm talking about the Savannah River site and the MOX facility? Is that the way to compel compliance from the federal?
In this instance, absolutely. You got to remember, with the MOX facility in Aiken, South Carolina, and there's a story that came out this week that it's over budget. My issue is not the politics of whether that was the right thing to build. My issue is that the federal government entered into a contractual relationship with the state of South Carolina through the National Defense Authorization Act years ago, where they said, first off, we want you to have this to process spent fuel, and so that it can be used. But then they shut down Yucca Mountain a couple of years ago unilaterally, not through the will of Congress. And then they shut down our ability to process the spent nuclear fuel we have. And so it's a national security issue, but it's also, they passed a law saying if we don't fund this by a certain date, and that date expires, we're going to be on the hook for $1 million a day for the first 100 days of every year until we meet our obligations. Federal government has not done that. They entered into a deal. and they have basically failed to meet their end of the bargain. And so my job is to hold them accountable under the very law that they themselves passed.
So the governor doesn't seem like she wants that nuclear fuel in the state anyway. So I don't know, are you getting the support from the governor's office? And Alan, if I may, is this about jobs or is this about compliance to an agreement?
It's both. Again, the rule of law has to mean something. A contract has to mean something. A promise has to mean something. And then, of course, when you don't honor that agreement or you don't honor that promise, it's going to cost jobs in South Carolina. And so, yes, for me, they are both equally important.
I have to admit, I've not thought of the Attorney General of the state of South Carolina in the context of economic development as much as I have in the last couple of minutes. So that's an interesting twist for me, an interesting way to think about that, and having family members associated with that MOX facility in particular, all up and down the chain, it's a real issue.
Yeah.
It's a real issue there. But in general, in terms of economic development, when we're out recruiting, is there a role that you play in that regard?
Absolutely. At some point, the governor's done a very good job in our state of recruiting businesses, but I have really tried to go out of my way to meet with the CEOs and the general counsels and the senior leadership of these companies, the ones that are both in South Carolina but also have corporate offices outside of South Carolina, and I go meet with them. And I'm saying, don't assume that I know everything that's going on in your industry. If you see a speck on the horizon, I don't see it. If you see that issue looking you in the face, to me, at best, it's a speck on the horizon. So call me. I give my cell phone out very freely to these CEOs and these general counsels. Call me and let me know if there's something coming up. It's hard to get the toothpaste back in the tube. So, it's all about communication is really what it is, and having those relationships with the business leaders in our state.
Colonel Dorney?
Well, you're a military officer. First of all, thank you for your military service in the National Guard. I know you've experienced combat leader in Iraq and now a staff judge advocate attorney in the National Guard. How has your military experience impacted you and your performance of your job as Attorney General? And is there a message there for employers about hiring the Guard to reserve and transitioning military people to sort of mitigate some of the workforce development issues we've been discussing?
Listen, as a combat veteran, my military experience is probably fundamentally the most important factor in how I conduct myself as Attorney General within the Office of Attorney General. I'll tell you a real quick story. I'm a brand new second lieutenant, first day in the United States Army, actually Army National Guard. I'm standing in front of my platoon. I'm 22 years old, sitting in front of 40 guys. All of them have more experience than me. They're older than me. I'm the newest guy, but they're all saluting me and calling me sir. That's a very nervous position to be in. Okay, fast forward 16 years later. I'm the youngest Attorney General in the country. I'm sitting in a conference room, first day in office, and I'm looking around the table, and I've got a bunch of lawyers who are all managers in the office, who've been in the office as long as I've been alive. Some have been in there as long as I've been alive. They're all calling me General Wilson and saying, what do you want us to do? I felt like that 22-year-old second lieutenant again.
All over again.
But the training I received in leadership in the military taught me that my job as a leader is not always to be the most experienced person or the most informed person on a particular issue. Just like a coach of a football team is not the best athlete. Their job is to leverage the human capital that they have and put them in a position where they can accomplish their organization's mission. As Attorney General, my job is to put those experienced, talented lawyers and support staff in the position where they can best serve the people of South Carolina. And so I learned to kind of build confidence as a leader. As a young 22-year-old second lieutenant, I brought it to the Office of Attorney General. So if you're a business and you're looking at hiring a veteran or someone, whether they're a corporal or a sergeant or a private or a general or a colonel, give them a chance, because they have learned those intangible skills that take years to develop in the business community. They learned it in months serving in the military.
Absolutely.
Your Honor, you sound like you could run for governor. You sound like a politician.
Well, thank you for calling me a politician. I'm sure every politician loves that.
No, but you sound like you want to convene people. And would you run for governor? Would you consider that?
Well, I personally believe that when you're not in the election cycle,
And we've got about 20 seconds.
well, my personal opinion is I need to focus on being Attorney General right now in the 2016 cycle, and I'll look at the 2018 cycle when it gets here. But right now, people hired me to be the Attorney General, and that's what I'm going to be until this cycle's over.
Thank you for being a guest in our program. It's been refreshing. We've never met before, but your father, Congressman Wilson, has been here, and he was sure to make sure that we did. So we have, and I'm glad we did. Thank you for being our guest. We hope to see you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
You
a lot of fun.
You bet. Colonel, it's always good to have you here. Thank you,
you,
Scott.
Chris. Appreciate it.
Dr. Booth, good to see you. Best
Always
wishes.
good to be out and about. Thank you for the good work.
Thank you for watching our program. Until next week, I'm Chris William. We hope all your business and certainly that your weekend is good. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.